In this lesson, we're going to solve equations that contain squared variables. To review, to solve an equation, what we do is we cancel items using the inverse operations. Inverse operations are two operations that undo each other. For example, if I take a number and I add 2 and then I subtract 2, I end up with the original number. Another example of inverse operations are times 6 and divided by 6. They're opposite actions, so they cancel each other out. Your learning goal for this lesson is to solve equations with squared variables. For example, x squared equals 25. You can see on the left side here, the variable is squared. That's the type of equation we're going to solve in this lesson. The inverse operation of squaring a number is taking the square root. If you take the square root of a squared base, the root and the exponent undo each other. For example, the square root of x squared equals just x. The square root and that exponent of 2 cancel each other out. Here's our first example. X squared equals 36. So since the inverse operation of squaring x is to take the square root of x, we're going to do that. But if I do it to the left side, remember I have to do it to the right side as well. So if I get the square root of x squared equals the square root of 36. What happens on the left side is the exponent of 2 and the square root cancel each other out. Now, something interesting is going to happen. On the right side, we're going to actually end up with two different possible solutions because negative 6 squared is 36 and positive 6 squared is 36. So anytime we take the square root of both sides, we're actually going to end up with two different answers, one positive and one negative. So let's go through that process a couple more times. I have x squared equals 49. I have to undo that exponent of 2. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. Now on the right side, I have this new symbol here. This is plus or minus. This is just a way to remind yourself that you're going to end up with a positive and a negative answer. So we end up with x equals negative 7 and x equals positive 7. Next problem, I have x squared equals 81. Since I have an exponent of 2 on the left side, I need to take the square root to cancel it out. So I get the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 81. And I end up with x equals negative 9 and x equals positive 9. So if I have x squared equals 64, same thing. I have an exponent of 2 that I need to undo. So I'm going to take the square root to cancel that out. So I get the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 64. Now I take the square root and I get x equals negative 8 and x equals positive 8. Our last example is x squared equals 4. Same process. I need to cancel out this exponent of 2, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and I get the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 4. And I end up with x equals negative 2 and x equals positive 2. And that's how you solve an equation that has a squared variable.